Hello everyone, today we will be reviewing the BLT LED non-sensor trim ring installations. These recall installation instructions cover the following sizes: 1 foot by 2 foot, 1 foot by 4 foot, 20 inch by 4 foot, 2 foot by 2 foot, and 2 foot by 4 foot. Please keep in mind that these recall instructions do not cover the BLT LED sensor fixtures. Before beginning any work, please follow the important safety instructions as highlighted on page 3 of the trim ring installation instructions. First of all, read and follow all safety instructions. Second of all, ensure that power is turned off to the fixture prior to any work being conducted. Third of all, make sure all work is conducted by a qualified professional. Fourth, for additional instructions and maintenance guides, please go to www.lithonia.com. Finally, make sure to wear gloves and safety goggles while doing work. The BLT LED non-sensor versions only require the removal and replacement of light traps on existing non-sensor versions. As shown here, this is a BLT sensor version. This does not need to be reworked per the installation instructions. The BLT LED non-sensor trim ring installation instructions only requires rework on existing BLT fixtures with light traps. This view shows existing BLT fixtures with light traps that require rework as a part of this installation instruction. Step 1 is to ensure that you have the proper trim ring for your installation. 1 foot by 2 foot, 1 foot by 4 foot, and 20 inch by 4 foot all share a similar trim ring with 4 embosses on the back surface. To identify these trim rings, just count on the back surface. 1, 2, 3, 4 embosses. You may either have a round or a square lens. Based on the profile of the lens, you will need to use the appropriate trim ring. If you have a round lens, you will need the round trim ring. And if you have a square profile lens, you will need the square trim ring. If you have a 2 foot by 2 foot or a 2 foot by 4 foot, you will need the 2 foot wide trim ring. These trim rings are identified with 3 embosses on the back surface. 1, 2, 3. Similarly, you may either have a round or a square lens. If you have a round lens, you will use the round trim ring. If you have a square lens, you will use the square trim ring. At step 2, we will remove the lens. In order to remove the lens, place your hand on the underside of the lens on one side and pry down on the channel side. The lens should disengage from the corner. Remove lens and keep for step 5A. Step 3 is to remove the existing light trap from the BLT LED non-sensor versions. In order to remove the light trap, simply place your finger on the underside of the legs and pull out. Similarly, do it on the second leg, and the light trap should disengage. Continue to do this on the second side of the fixture to remove the second light trap. After both the light traps have been removed from the existing BLT LED non-sensor versions, you will need to break the light traps and dispose of them. Ensure safety goggles and gloves are on prior to breaking the light traps. In order to break the light traps, simply bend and dispose. In step 4, we will be installing one trim ring into the existing BLT LED non-sensor trim ring version. Please note we will not install both trim rings, just one on one side of the fixture. To install the trim ring, align the locating features on the trim ring to the keyhole feature of the end cap. Place trim ring firmly against end cap and push up. To ensure that the trim ring has been fully engaged, simply tug on it. If the trim ring does not move or disengage, the trim ring has been fully engaged. In order to ensure that the trim ring has been properly installed, please make sure that there is no gap between the end cap and trim ring interface. This trim ring is properly installed, therefore there is no gap between the trim ring and end cap. This scenario shows the trim ring improperly installed. As you can see, there is a noticeable gap between the end cap and the trim ring at this location. If there is a gap, the trim ring is improperly installed. This scenario again shows the trim ring not properly installed. As you can see, there's a gap between the end cap and trim ring. When there is a gap, the trim ring is improperly installed. Now we will proceed to step 5. Retrieve the lens that was taken off the BLT LED non-sensor version from step 2A. Slide the lens into the first trim ring that has already been installed. Then place the second trim ring on the other end of the lens and hold firmly as shown. With the second trim ring on the second end of the lens as shown and held firmly, slide up the trim ring into the end cap. You will hear multiple clicks during this process. Line up the locating features on the trim ring to the keyholes on the end cap. Push one side up to engage the trim ring into the end cap. Similarly, push the second side up to engage the trim ring into the end cap. Step 6 is to ensure that the trim rings and the lens have been fully installed into the existing BLT LED non-sensor versions. To do so, simply grab the lens toward the center and pull down. If the trim rings are not fully installed, you will feel them move or disengage. If the trim rings feel loose or disengage, repeat step 5E for both trim rings. Thank you.